professionally, you are known as an accomplished civil rights leader, lawyer, author, filmmaker, educator, and innovator. Valarie, what is it that personally led you to lead this movement that you are now known for as well, of revolutionary love?
It began 20 years ago. I wasn't planning to be an activist or to work in civil rights. It was in the aftermath of 9/11 when I was a college student and Balbir Singh Sodhi was killed. The first person killed in a hate crime after 9/11 was a Sikh father who I knew as a family friend. His murder really turned me into an activist. I needed a way to be able to tell the country his story, his story and the stories of thousands of people who were facing hate violence on the street across America, and then eventually state violence by our own government. Our stories were drowned out in this anthem of national unity. And so I grabbed my camera, I got in my car with my cousin, and we drove across the country to capture these stories. And that became my first documentary film. The crisis never ended, the backlash never ended, so I just kept being called back to the streets. And then I realized I needed more tools. Once I found myself locked behind bars after a protest, that's when I realized, I need to be more savvy when it comes to fighting institutions of power. So I went to law school and became a lawyer. So it's almost like I just expanded my toolkit as the years went on. And all along, Allié, I had this idea that, with every film, with every lawsuit, with every campaign, that we were making the nation safer for the next generation. I become a mother just when hate crimes are skyrocketing in the United States. It's the 2016 election season, and I have an all-out crisis. I opened up my toolkit and I just couldn't show up. I couldn't do it. I left my job at Stanford Law. I spent time just sitting and feeling my despair, and then realizing that anytime I have worked with people who have faced this much hopelessness, they keep showing up because of the way that they are being held by community, beloved community. I started to realize that, we need sound government and we need just policy. But the crisis we have in this country is primarily a spiritual crisis. It's a social crisis. It's a crisis of the heart. And what we need is a shift in culture and consciousness. And what we need is a new way of being and seeing each other. A revolution of the heart. So I started to begin to believe that revolutionary love is the call of our times. How can we teach people, inspire people, equip people to do the work of building beloved community where they are, to see no stranger? 20 years from now, 25 years from now, if the world that we're living in today is shaped by the choices that were made in the aftermath of 9/11 to divide the world into us and them, this decision that's been made since the founding of this country, then could we make different choices now to shape what the next 20 years might look like? And so this movement around revolutionary love began to rise because I realized that I wasn't alone, that there were activists and artists and thought leaders and people on the ground and mothers and fathers and students, young people who were hungry for something that was muscular enough to fight the hate and the vitriol and the inequality that we're grappling with in our country right now. And so that's why I believe revolutionary love is the call of our times, that each of us has a role in that great labor. It's just a matter of deciding what I want my role to be. And you know what I found, Allié?
What?
Now that I've found revolutionary love, it's a song that I'll be singing for the rest of my life. And I begin to see that showing up with love in the labor for justice gives me longevity.
That is beautiful. That is beautiful. You've got a way with words. Let me just say that. um, there's a specific set of words that I wanted to address, and incredibly powerful words that speak to the darkness of our times. Amidst all of this social injustice, all of this angst that we find ourselves in the midst of, and these are the words. To quote you, is this the darkness of the tomb or the darkness of the womb? It is amazing how much insight can be found in a single question. So I love to hear from you about when this question first came to you, and then how you today, now, would answer that.
The question first came to me when I would put my son down in his crib at night after a long day, just feeling so exhausted. And then I would pick up my phone and look at the news and just feel this visceral pain in my body. Worried not about myself anymore, but about him. And for all of my tools, like not being able to protect him when he's on the street or in the schoolyard and someone yells, "Go back to your country." And I realized, like, the last time I felt that much pain was, physical pain, was on the birthing table. There's that moment in birthing labor, with my particular labor, that I entered this stage called transition. It's the final stage in birthing labor. It's the most painful, the most dangerous stage, and yet it is the stage that precedes the birth of new life. So that's where I thought, okay, the future is dark. There are days that are so dark that I can taste the ash in my mouth. Certainly what we've been seeing in Afghanistan, I have felt the ash, I've tasted the ash in my mouth as we're watching Kabul fall. And the next moment, the darkness of the tomb changes into the darkness of the womb. I see glimpses of the nation, the world that is longing to be born, a world where we're all standing up for one another and seeing each other as sisters, brothers, as siblings, daughters, as sons. And I've also seen that, as devastating as it's been, never before have I seen this many people in the United States stand up for refugees. Then in the wake of the horror in Afghanistan, and I say, well, what if this is the starting point of birthing a nation that welcomes all immigrants and refugees, that says we will lead with love above all, that we won't continue to ban and deter and to cage and then for the illusion of security. Instead, we have the capability, we have the resources of building a safe world where we can all be free and where our dignity is recognized, valued, where we are beloved. So that question, Allie, is literally the question I ask myself every morning. And I've come to feel like it's both, it's both the darkness of the tomb, the ash in the mouth, the reality of everything that we are losing and that we have lost. And it's okay to sit in that grief, and it's okay to sit in that trauma and that rage. And then I invite you to take the next breath and say, oh, what is emerging here that has never emerged before? What are the new possibilities here that we can birth, that we could never have done before, because there are more people now awake and standing with each other and reaching out, rooted with love, guided by love than ever before. And those moments, if I can hold both, then that gives me the ability to keep showing up.
Right. Well, and I love that. And again, it's that space to hold both and not to deny one or the other, but to create that space to do that. Yeah, when I first heard that, I just, I sat with that for a long while. And I can't tell you how many people I was like, wait, let me just tell you something. Wait for it. Listen. I share it. And I'm like, huh? And they're like,
You know what happened? I delivered those words at a watch night service on New Year's Eve in 2016, and right on the day of the inauguration, and then the next day, the day of the Women's March in 2017, the speech started to go viral, and there were, almost overnight, 40 million views, and my inbox was flooded with questions like, "We're ready to breathe, and we're ready to push, but how? How do we breathe? How do we push?" And I knew that I knew, but I actually couldn't find the language and the clarity, and I needed to answer the question for myself. So that's when I took time away from the front lines. I moved my family to the rainforest in Central America for a year to breathe, to go through everything I had written, to try to answer the question of how do we keep showing up to the labor. And that's where I began to see these patterns, these practices that I call revolutionary love. And our ancestors have labored before us, and so what emerged was this book, See No Stranger, and it's a memoir and it's a manifesto for how we can bring revolutionary love into our lives now.
Right. Well, it's an incredible concept, and again, just those few words. So let's switch gears from words, from statements, to a lot of statements put together in the form of a film. Your first film, Divided We Fall, won international awards, became known as the go-to documentary on post 9/11 hate crimes. It inspired conversations on campuses and communities across the country. Toward the end of this powerful film, going to quote you again, I enjoy doing that, you state, "Stories can change how we see. Stories can break down the wall dividing us from them." And I absolutely agree. So the question here, of all the stories you've heard a lot. Valarie, please share one story that changed the way you see things.
It was my very last interview on the road after 9/11. Here I am, this college kid who is just driving from home to home, from Gurdwara to mosque, from city to city in the wake of 9/11, sometimes arriving when the blood was still fresh on the ground, and I would sit with aunties and uncles telling me the most painful moments of their life. And what was the most painful was not necessarily the act of violence, but what followed. This lost sense of belonging, this lost dignity. And I was beginning to feel the kind of despair spread through my chest. And I realized after 100 hours of footage, there was one interview I still had to do. I needed to interview the widow of Balbir Singh Sodhi, the widow of the first man who was killed in a hate crime after 9/11. So we flew all across the world to India. We drove through the villages to Punjab, past the farmlands, until we reached her house. And there she was, standing in the doorway, dressed in white, the color of mourning, and there were dark circles under her eyes. And I had this long list of questions, and I just looked at my questions, and I looked at her, and I just crumpled them up, and I sat with her, and I wept with her. And as I was beginning to feel that despair, clench my heart, I asked her the only question I could. What would you like to tell the people of America? And I was waiting for that resentment, that bitter response. And she said, "Thank you. Tell them thank you. When I went to Arizona for my husband's memorial, 3,000 people came to grieve with me. They didn't know me. Hindu, Christian, Muslim, Jew. They came and they wept with me. They loved me. Tell them thank you for their love." Allie, that moment changed my life. Because I returned, I get on the plane, I return. I'm like, what? How? And I realized that while the nation as a whole didn't hear these stories, the local Sikh community did an incredible job of telling other faith communities in Mesa, Arizona, and Phoenix that we needed them. And so they did show up. 3,000 people showed up to see Bilbir Uncle, not as a foreigner or as a terrorist, but as a neighbor, as a brother. So that was the moment I really began to understand the power of story and telling the untold stories to change how we see and therefore what we do.
Yeah, so that's an unforgettable one. Yeah, I can see how that could just create such a shift in your whole reality and in everything. So let's go back to your book. Da, 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 da. So let's talk about this. So your book, See No Stranger.
Can I show you?
Yeah.
The paperback is coming out on September 7th, and so here is the cover of the paperback.
It's beautiful.
Yeah, it's the Sikh wisdom sort of woven throughout the visuals, and this is designed by Shepard Fairey, and he just did this magical job of capturing the message.
It's beautiful. And so this is why I get the paper book next, and then I have always one copy I can keep with me and one I can roll out. So never have to be without. These are the good things to consider. So See No Stranger, it's a memoir, manifesto of revolutionary love, inspires people beyond words. In fact, Ani DeFranco was so inspired by this book, by your book, that she wrote not only a song, but an entire album, appropriately titled Revolutionary Love, with so much to take away from your book. What is the one thing, if there could be only one thing, what one thing would you hope that people would take and keep and share?
It's in the title. To see no stranger. What if, as you're walking down the street, you could begin to retrain how your eye sees, so that anyone who is approaching you, you could look at them and say, sister, brother, sibling, child, grandparent, my beloved. What would it mean to change how we see, so it's no longer us and them, but we're imagining all of us as part of one big beloved family? And so then if you did see someone in harm's way and you saw them as your own daughter, what would you do differently? You wouldn't have to think about doing the right thing because it would come from your heart. You've already trained your eye to see no stranger, to see through the eyes of love.
That is beautiful. And I love that it's, while it's such a big concept, it seems so simple, and it's just the shifting, it's just like, put on the other glasses, come on,
Well, Allie, it's the ancient truth. I'm declaring revolutionary love as this new declaration of our times, but really, love is our birthright. I'm just recovering the wisdom that is already buried inside of us. For thousands of years, we've heard this call to love without limit on the lips of spiritual teachers, movement leaders, indigenous healers, our scriptures, our songs, our stories. This is our next great transition. Can we take the call to love that we have heard, that we know is right in our hearts, and actually practice it on a scale we never have before? Can we structure our society around the concept that every single person has dignity? Can we build beloved community in every school, in every house, in every street corner? Is it possible? It must be, because it's the only way we will not perish. It's the only way humanity itself will survive, is to take this ethic of love and actualize it.
Yeah, no, I very much agree, for sure. So I don't know when you sleep, because you do so many things. So in addition to producing films and publishing books, you also created a compass. Why not make a compass? Everyone should create a compass, yeah? So your compass, I love. It's one in which all directions lead to love. So I would love to discuss, it seems to me that this is an ideal instrument, given these days and times that we're in, because so many of us are so lost. And so please share the concept behind this revolutionary love compass, because I think it's amazing.
Yeah. Before I do that, I sleep because nothing is done alone. I sleep because I'm part of a team and part of a movement. And this compass is certainly an example of that. While I was writing See No Stranger in the rainforest, I was bringing together a set of research scholars to make sure that these 10 core practices that we were identifying were not just infused with ancestral wisdom, but grounded in practical research. So from that emerged this idea of like, well, if people are asking how, the question, how do we practice it? I want to put a tool in their hand. So the Revolutionary Love Compass brings to life these 10 practices. You can imagine each of these practices as points on this compass. And it's organized in 3 really simple ways. You can point the compass to an other, and the primary practice there is to see no stranger, to practice wondering about others, to look upon the face of anyone and say, you are a part of me I do not yet know. Mm-hmm. Then to allow that, to let that story into your heart, to grieve with them. And in that shared grieving is information for how to fight for them, your role for how to fight for them. So the wondering, the grieving, and fighting is how we practice seeing no stranger, how to love others. So then this is the hard part, right? How do we turn the compass to an opponent? I don't use the word enemy here because there are, the book is filled with stories of every time I want to hate a person, every time I want to see them as a monster, I hear their story and I see their wound. And I realize that there are no such thing as monsters. There are only human beings who are wounded. And yet there are still opponents. So opponents are people who are opposed to your life, your dignity, your ideas, your way of being. Your opponents can come in any form, and some feel very permanent, but the idea of making it so that it's possible that they might not always stay in that category is the idea of calling them opponent, not enemy. So we're facing our opponent, we're pointing our compass at the opponent. The primary practice there is to tend the wound. It begins with tending your own wound. So rage is a core practice of revolutionary love, to honor your rage, to feel your rage, to harness the energy of your rage for creative action, nonviolent action. That is a core practice. And then if you are safe to listen to your opponent, not to change them, but to understand them, to understand the wound, and then to take that information to not just resist, but to reimagine the world that could be. So this raging and listening and reimagining is how we can practice orienting to our opponents with love. And we turn the compass one more time, and this often gets left out, right? So our social reformers, from Gandhi to King to Mandela, they have talked at length about how to love others, how to love our opponents, not so much about how to love ourselves. This is the feminist intervention. So this is, I really look to Black women leaders from bell hooks to Audre Lorde. Loving our own flesh, our own bodies is not a form of self-indulgence, but a form of political warfare, because it says we matter too, and we've got to last, and joy matters, and longevity matters, and our dignity matters. And so the core practices there are breathing, pushing, and transitioning. So to remember the wisdom of the midwife. She doesn't say breathe once and push the rest of the way. No, she says breathe, my love, and then push, and then breathe again. And I find that if I'm showing up to my life with love, orienting to others with love, I'm able to form deep solidarity. If I'm orienting to opponents with love, I'm able to do the work of understanding. If I am orienting to myself with love, I'm finding longevity. And the 10th practice, joy.
I love how what you write, what you create, all of your tools, that they are very much about awareness, transitioning that to action, right? So it begins with awareness, and then to actually have the tools to change that into actions. And I think that's part that's missing, because you can be told all day, you can be made aware all day, but then the next step comes, right? Now, what do I do with this awareness? And so to have the tools that you offer, to have this compass, to have, this book to kind of guide you through, I think that's such an incredible tool. And that's exactly what it is. And perhaps one of the most important tools, of our time.
When I was a little girl, my grandfather helped raise me and would always tell me the stories of our sick ancestors and stories of, poets and warriors and sages and martyrs and pioneers. And of all the stories, the one that I loved the most was the story of the Sant Sipahi, the sage warrior. That was the model. That's what Papaji said we could all be. The warrior fights, the sage loves. It's a path of revolutionary love. And I think that space that I occupy and that more and more people are hungry for, I went to divinity school and law school. I'm part of the interfaith movement, and I'm with the faith communities and the spiritual groups that are focused on wellness. And then I'm part of the civil rights movements of our time. And anytime I'm with one, I can hear them longing for the other. When I'm with my spiritual folks, they're like, and how do we take this? How do we pray with our feet? How do we take this off the yoga mat? How do we turn this into action? And when I'm with my civil rights folks, it's like, and how do we last? How do we see the humanity of our opponents? How do we lead with love? How do we love on ourselves? And so this is what's been missing in our landscape is the both. And there are more and more people who are rising up with the both. And what I'm excited by is that we have been creating into this space and meeting people's needs. And we just released a Revolutionary Love Learning Hub with free teaching videos and guided inquiries, entire educational curricula. And I'm seeing people take that into their lives. Schools are making revolutionary love the ethic of their school culture, and houses of worship are doing readings around it, and organizations, advocates are opening up the tools. And my hope, is that, revolutions happen not just in those big, grand public moments, but in the spaces where people are inhabiting a new way of being. So can we see the critical mass with the tools for building beloved community where we are? And might that shift culture as a whole, so that 25 years from now, we're seeing a new kind of society come into being?
Right. Yeah, all the steps along the way, each one is important and required. Yeah. So, that is amazing. So for those who are hearing your words and reading your books and seeing your films, and who are inspired to be part of this movement of revolutionary love, what is the best way to be part of it, to support it? I mean, there's a lot of different tools that you offer. What is the best way for someone to say, okay, I'm ready?
You are already part of it. We are already part of it. If any of this is resonating with your heart, it is just uncovering this deep wisdom that's already there. You know how to love. Yeah. You know how to wonder. And you know that your hands must follow. And so what we have are the tools to help you put into action what you already know to be true and what you're already doing. The best way is to go to seenostranger.com and check out the Learning Hub, and then take what's there, what you need, into your life and bring it to your people. Right. Read the book together, watch the films together, do the guided meditations together. Imagine what it would mean to make this a shared vocabulary and shared compass that you might all be able to use, and then tell us about it so that we can learn about how you are embodying revolutionary love where you are.
So, well, that sounds amazing. And yeah, I can't thank you enough for taking this time to share your thoughts, share your words, share all these lovely tools that you have. Love my book, but excited about your paperback that's coming out. So excited to see where all of this leads and where this movement takes us as we move forward. And I just can't thank you enough for helping us all become a bit more aware now. Thank you so much. Thank you.